Left, right, out. I was just going over some clips, and I came across. I haven't listened to Rogan in a long time, but I listened to him for years and years, and back in the day, when he first started. But he had Zuckerberg on there. We're talking about this Hunter Biden laptop story again, which always seems to resurface because it's like a quintessential story of how things seem to be orchestrated against one side. And Zuck, he kind of, and by the way, my account on there somehow got a warning over a post with pertaining to the lady on the motorized cart, older lady that got trampled by the police horses in Canada during some protests. I don't even know how long ago that was, but all of a sudden, like yesterday, Facebook comes and wants to put some kind of censor on there, and then they put in a warning on my account. Pretty crazy. And that post happened God knows when, a long while ago. Anyway, so Zuckerberg explains and pretty much throws the FBI under the bus about basically saying, hey, this is be on the lookout for Russian propaganda. And he kind of puts a lot of the responsibility of the censorship of that story on them, which, didn't explain everything. But at the same time, what it did get me thinking about was all the one-sidedness coming from the FBI. And we've already, if you haven't already noticed, it's pretty blatant now. I don't see how anybody of sound reason, mind, and not looking at parties. I don't care about the right or the left. I'm just looking through an objective lens here. That the FBI is, I kind of alluded to in some Twitter posts with another gentleman about that they're acting like brown shirts. But to me, I think it's more relatable at this point where we're seeing certain things that this is more of a Praetorian Guard in a sense. They're almost like their own entity, which they, if you look at the Hoover days, they kind of were too. So they're more like a Praetorian Guard in the sense that they've gotten to the point where they protect leaders that they like. They attack leaders that they don't or might be a possible threat to them. They almost, and with this Hunter Biden thing, almost at a pseudo picking and choosing who their leader is. And if you're familiar with the Praetorian Guard, eventually, they're Roman warriors that were tasked with defending the emperor and other, I guess, closely related things. And they got so powerful that they were known to they're like selecting Caesars at one point and killing them, and they're very powerful. FBI is kind of like that. Like I said, history doesn't directly repeat itself; it's parallel. So, they're not the ones that, you'd say the Secret Service is, and that's a whole nother topic. But the FBI definitely wields a lot of power within here, and they seem to be picking winners and losers when it comes to justice and when it comes to even leadership to a certain extent. So Zuckerberg kind of reveals this, something we've kind of speculated, and we already knew that some of these three-letter agencies are utilizing contacts within the media, which is fascistic, in order to press them then doing certain things or not doing certain things. And so one of the other things, the Trump raid document just came out. I'm back at home finishing this up. Heavily redacted. Don't even really care to look at it, just because this is full of crap. The other interesting thing that's happening regarding law enforcement is I guess Gavin McInnes, if you ever heard of that guy, he's a comedian, founder of the Proud Boys. He was on air, and what appears to be law enforcement showed up. I don't know for sure to confirm that, but he may have been arrested. But it's pretty odd when I watched the clip. Just an odd circumstance. So I don't know what's going on, but there, if you look at the overall thing, it appears to be kind of a right-wing roundup in a sense. But things are getting real. I think people have been exposed to the FBI's corruption. It has always been corrupt throughout its history, through the Hoover. In fact, like Hoover was being paid off by La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, through different mechanisms, through his boyfriend in Dog Tracks. But that's a whole nother point, or another side note. But there was always an air of kind of a virtue still in there, like some principles that were operated on. Now the institution has devolved, and this is what happens when you let a little bit of corruption in there to thrive. The institution has devolved into a political mechanism that's apparently being used by an ideology at this point. It's very odd to look at all these things. Like, let's take the Trump thing. From what I've heard about what's in this document, what they're going, I think they're going after 3 different federal codes. One of them is about espionage. Now, obviously, what we know is he was talking with the archives and the federal authorities on what to do with these documents. This is nothing out of the ordinary. These kind of documents are something that I believe that even like Obama, Clinton, all that, they usually get archived, or maybe they're put into their library. Now, let's juxtapose that with the Clinton thing, where there's 3,000 or 30,000 something emails that were destroyed. They bleach bit the hard drives, destroyed BlackBerries with hammers. I know you've heard that time and time again, but I think what we do forget is at the same time when Clinton was at the head of this thing, there was some sort of leak that could have possibly come from her server. In fact, there's some evidence to that extent that it cost the lives of a number of Intel assets that were in the Asia Pacific area, especially in China. There was a huge Intel roundup, if you don't recall, in China, and they either executed or imprisoned a number of Western Intel agents. So who knows? But I believe that there's some evidence that possibly would have tied that in there. Now, why we didn't investigate further is because she's part of the political apparatchik, an untouchable, and part of this one ideology. So Comey didn't do anything. And here we're seeing the exact opposite with just a nothing burger that's being turned into a way to politically bash a former president who will probably be running for president again in an attempt to keep him out because he does stir the pot. Whether I agree with him on a number of economic issues or some, like the bump stock thing I don't agree with. There's a few other things, but he was who he was, and he was in there, I guess, to the best of his ability in this swamp doing, trying to clean that thing out. But I mean, of course, there was, the Steve Bannon's, or not Steve Bannon, who's the other guy? He basically foments war everywhere. It's not Steve Bannon. It's I forgot his name. But you have Pompeo. You have those type of characters that are pushing war everywhere, or pushing war certain areas. Like Pompeo is an interesting character because he's also anti-Chinese, but at the same time he's still part of that political apparatus. It doesn't mean they're all in lockstep. There's just a group of them that run in those circles. But that guy was thinking, man, why can't I think of his name? He has a mustache, and he's just written a book. And John Bolton, that's who he is. The Bolton types, which we warned against. The Comeys, Bill Barr, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, the 3 guys that Trump should have never put in where he put him in. And we wouldn't see a lot of this. It would have been a lot smoother. More things would have gotten done if we didn't have those 3 in there. If we didn't have Paul Ryan too at that one time, but Trump couldn't do anything about that. Anyway, so this is a huge attempt, in my opinion. It's hard to look at this any other way, to be totally honest, when you take into account all the other machinations of what the FBI has been doing over the last few years. It's very hard to see how there's any impartiality in this, or how there's any justice in this. And I don't really give a crap whether they have an R or D symbol on their beside their name. The only D's that ever go to the prison, which James Traficant, he was a Democratic dude that went to prison for some obscure thing. Rod Blagojevich, I believe, went to prison, and it was because they crossed the wrong people in that party. Had nothing to do with the fact that what they were doing was illegal. James Traficant, I don't even think he was doing anything bad. Blagojevich, probably he was, but he was doing the same thing that everybody else was doing, only he just crossed the wrong lines, and he was politically expedient. So the people that are held accountable on the left are only ones that kind of cross the leadership. And then they also are weaponizing through, hey, they had an ideological infiltration of these organizations, and now they can really use them against their political enemies. Now, the one thing about that now is we've seen, and I urge other Republicans to back off on supporting a lot of these agencies. I mean, they're good people within law enforcement and whatnot, but you got to stand by principles and not, just blatant statements that you support this whole community. Because who's going to come after you when the left takes over, when the left's in power like we're seeing? It's not them. You don't see Biden stacking up against the wall with a gun. You're not going to see Pelosi over here. It's the guys in uniform in these three-letter agencies, or maybe even local law enforcement, if they have the balls to actually bust down some doors. But they're the ones that are going to do it. So you got to make sure that these institutions, one, live by the principles that they were founded upon, for the most part. I mean, if it's like a CIA or FBI especially and whatnot, they need to be just destroyed. We need to, kind of streamline the intelligence services, because some of them have so much power. It's incredible. Like Hoover did. Hoover had, let's go back to Hoover real quick, and I'm going to end this. Hoover had files on everybody. Everybody of power, of consequence, he had files, just like the mafia did. They all learned from each other. The mafia taught the CIA how to do this kind of thing, honeypotting these people, getting them in very, weird circumstances, getting evidence of that, and keeping it over the head. The FBI was doing that for years. CIA's been doing it. You think that train of thought has left those agencies over the number of years since, they kind of decoupled from, well, I won't say decoupled, because there's probably there's evidence that there's a lot of connections between the cartels and some of this stuff going on. But they just changed teams, that's all. But the principles that they learned when it comes to, these type of things are still in place. So I would imagine once you get up into any level of consequence, that these guys have a file on you. And I don't know how you get around that, but you need to destroy these people. And the only guy that doesn't seem like to care about any of this is Trump. Like, he just goes after you. He doesn't care what you bring out. Grab him by the whatever, and who cares, right? Which wasn't even that bad, really. But, so they're afraid of this dude, because he doesn't care. If we just had more of those. But anyway, everything is not what it seems in these agencies, as much as they want to portray themselves as virtuous in front of the media, or through the media. It's harder and harder to keep that act up, as we see, and it's harder and harder for people to ignore this kind of thing. So that's all I can say. Talk to you later. Peace.